Welcome back. In this video, let's start actually writing the React code that we need to make this to-do list thing actually work. So I've really debated about exactly how to do this. I mean, it's a very simple component, but there's a couple different ways you could approach this. I think what we're going to do is try to do what I would do, which is to try to make it as uh, more performant as possible. So we're probably going to split out this top section here with this input and this button into its own component and give that a controller. And then our list item here will be broke out into another controller. And then we'll probably separate out the list items into their own component as well. So let's go ahead and just start with this top one. And once we get going here, this should be not too difficult. So I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new directory here, and we're just going to call this to do input. And it's going to be index.tsx. Export default function to do input, like so. And then I'm going to go back to our main file here, and I am just going to probably grab everything in this form here. We're just going to cut that out. And then we will return that, like so. And then we can just copy and paste this into our component. So here we go. We have a to-do input. So let's go ahead and write a controller for this. So, I mean, rather than write a controller from scratch, usually what I do is I just copy a controller that already exists, because a lot of these things are kind of the same and there's not really a lot of point to completely rewrite them from scratch. So don't feel like you're beholden to do it. It's just much faster to kind of do this ourselves. And so typically I would break these states out into different type files as well. It depends. Usually my project has a dedicated types directory where I keep all the types for the entire project in it. But I think we're going to do this just a little differently, just because this is a tutorial and how like everything's already set up. It just isn't a very good way to do that. So let's go in here and we're just going to have a state. We're going to change this from mega state to state. And the state is really just the value of our input as type string. And then we have a new state, which returns a state, and it returns a value like so. Okay. So we're going to call this to do input controller. So, and I'm just going to refactor this file name to be the same thing. General rule of thumb for me is if it isn't the main like component file like this, I mean, you should directly spell out the file name should be the same as like the class or the function name or whatever you're doing here. Okay, so we're just going to clean this up a little bit by just pasting in the relevant values where we need them. This is much more like what a normal component looks like. I don't usually use the term mega state, but that was just for the example. Okay. And we're going to need to have a method in here that updates our state. So usually what I like to do here is I like to kind of follow the convention of React. So I usually name this actually update state. I kind of break this a little bit like so, just so I can have a method called set state. So when I call it for my component, it kind of feels the same as it would if I was writing this directly inside of the component. And then we can have if this.update state. Since it can be undefined, we need to check that it's okay that we do this. And you know, we're going to add another value here called default state, which is a state. And it will be a new state like this. And then we can just have the default state here. This just helps with any kind of race condition. And so like if update state, it doesn't actually exist. What we can do here is we can set this dot default state equals to, this will take a value, which is a state. In fact, we should just call this state like this. Okay. So this is good, and we just want to make sure that we update the state here, and then this will call this dot update state with the new state. Cool. So we need actually one more function in here, or one method, and that's going to handle take in the change input from our HTML input element. So we need on change. What did we call it? On change value. Okay. And we can just use an arrow function here like we've done in the past. And the property type on this, what we're going to be getting is, so if we look at our input here, this is our form controller. And what we're trying to look for is, it should have an onChange event. And you can see when we go to the autocomplete here, that onChange, it's a React.change event handler of type form control element. Okay, so we want to remember that. And if you're here and you don't know what type is expected on this, you can press Control and then click it. And it'll actually take you into the definition of the file. And then we can see here, here's the actual definition. It's React.change event form control element. But really all we need is like this part right here. Okay, so let's go back to our controller. And so we can type event. And then change event handler, it doesn't like that. I need to import that. So that gets imported directly from React. Or you could type React dot, but that's I don't really like doing that. And then form control element, we're just going to import. Okay, I forgot. I think the TypeScript definitions are messed up on this particular package, and this is why it doesn't work correctly. We can get around this by just changing this to change event, and then just importing that from React, and then just making this an HTML input element like this. This will be good enough. And then we can set our state. And we want to set the value to event target dot value. This should work. So let's go back to our to-do input here. And this to-do input doesn't have a controller in it. So what we can do is we can make a new controller. New to-do input controller, like so. And there we go. And our IDE doesn't like that we've made this variable here, and we're never going to actually use it, so we can just remove that. That's fine. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. Our form control needs to take a value of some kind. So, and we can get that from the controller. Usually I kind of rename it just to shorthand it a little bit. So, controller.state, something like this, works out pretty well. We need to make sure that we add this use controller so that we can use the hooks that are inside of this controller. And it'll just be state.value like this. Okay, so let's check this out. It looks like we might have an error here, just an import error, not a big deal. We'll save the file, we'll go back and we'll take a look at our component. And when we type in this, it should update. Very cool. And just to make sure everything is working correctly when this set state runs, I'm just going to make sure everything is hooked up correctly and that I didn't miss something here. So I'm going to go to console and we see the set state update messages. So we know this is all hooked up correctly and everything is working exactly how we expect it to work. Okay, that's very cool. Now the last thing that I want to do here, I think on this button here is I want to make sure that it's disabled if the value is empty inside of our value. So the way that we can do that is what I'm going to do is install lodash. If you're not familiar with lodash, it's just a library. It has a bunch of functions in it that are handy to use sometimes. So npm I save lodash. And then I am going to import lodash from lodash. Okay. And then what we can do here is we can use the disabled prop. And then we can just put in here lodash is empty, state.value. Okay. And what this empty function does from lodash is it checks if the value is empty, but it checks it in a smarter way than just a basic like JavaScript check. Like if it's a string, it checks, does it have length? Does it have non-blank characters, like non-space characters inside of it? So it does this kind of stuff. So it's a lot more of a handy function than checking it in different ways. So this should be fine. Oh, it says that it can't find lodash. So here's another problem. So what we need to do is we need to include the lodash types as well. So I'm just going to try to copy this, and it's being a little bugger. So and the reason that we use save dev here instead of save is, well, this goes into, as we talked about before, the dev dependencies, and the dev dependencies are, well, dependencies you need for development, and dependencies are the dependencies that you need for actual production, okay? So this is looking good. Let's go test that feature out. So right now we see that it's like grayed out and we can't actually click on this anymore. And then we just say hello and it comes to life. Okay, so this is going to end our first section on writing a controller for our component. So that's done now and all hooked up and ready to go. So let's go ahead and in the next video, we'll work on the items. All right, I'll see you there.